pure,
inquisitive,
sharing, innocent,
valuable,
history makers,
happy,
harmless,
vulnerable,
family.
precious.
I think of all of that when I think of children.
We use a wooden statue of the Sankofa as our talking piece. It's a bird looking backwards with an egg in its beak. Sankofa teaches us that we must go back to our roots so that we can achieve our full potential as we move forward.
This is Nova Scotia, a province on the east coast of Canada. People of African descent have lived here for hundreds of years in communities around the province.
And what it symbolizes that, our journey to the light at the end of the tunnel kind of thing, that we see that there's hope when you talk about light.
On behalf of the government of Nova Scotia, I want to apologize today to those who suffered abuse and neglect at the Nova Scotia Home for Colored Children. It is one of the great tragedies in our province's history that your cries for help were greeted with silence for so long. The struggle of the home is only one chapter in a history of systemic racism and inequality that has scarred our province for generations. Some of you faced horrific abuse that no child should ever experience. You deserved a better standard of care. For the trauma and neglect you endured and their lingering effects on you and your loved ones, we are truly sorry.
On behalf of Voices and the former residents of Nova Scotia Home for Colored Children, it is with great honor to acknowledge and accept the Honourable Stephen McNeil, Premier of Nova Scotia Government, heartfelt apology to all the former residents of the Nova Scotia Home for Colored Children who were abused. I'm very proud to say that I am a former resident of Nova Scotia Home for Colored Children. That is something that I used to be ashamed of.
We keep this candle lit as a reminder of our focus to do no further harm. We keep this candle burning to remind us of what matters, the truth.
Stories have touched many Nova Scotians already, and they will touch many more in the coming months. This inquiry will take a restorative approach. It will focus on healing and finding better ways to move forward in our collective future.
We, the board leadership of the home, apologize to the former residents and staff who suffered or experienced harms at the home.
When it came time to have the meeting with the Premier and we discussed what we wanted to do, he made it very clear that he wanted us, the former residents, to pick the design team. He wanted us, the former residents, to come up with the terms of reference. And he wanted us, the former residents, to have an inquiry that's in keeping with do no further harm. And he was true to form, and that's exactly what we did.
When I talked to so many former residents, that it wasn't all about money. And so we looked for other avenues to heal harms in ways that money could never do. And through the help of many people, the restorative inquiry was born. Traditionally, when we as a society or when government wants to look into something that went wrong, a systemic failure in one of its systems, they'll order a public inquiry. There's legislation called the Public Inquiries Act. And what that typically means is hiring an individual with some legal background, usually a judge or a retired judge, and that person will hear evidence in a formal setting, typically, and then make findings of fact, essentially assess the truth as he or she sees it, and then make recommendations, write a report, and government can choose then to accept or reject those recommendations. And we know historically that a lot of those recommendations end up sitting on shelves and collecting dust, and only to be pulled up again maybe a decade later when another systemic failure happens. We've termed this a restorative inquiry as opposed to a public inquiry, based on adapting a restorative approach. Right? I don't think there's ever been a restorative inquiry anywhere in the world before, and this is the first of its kind.
When we were given the go-ahead to do this process, we had to get some people in the process that knew a new way forward. We had to search out people who were doing something different. Enter Jennifer Llewellyn.
So she had that experience. And we're saying we need the experience. We can't just do this ourselves. We need somebody that's had a background in this so we can design something ourselves. And the design team was about bringing the whole community together. So we brought members of government. We brought former residents. So we had that section of it. We brought a member of the Nova Scotia Home Board of Directors in.
The restorative process is I want to say it's not brand new because it's been a way of life for us years and centuries ago. So going back to Sankofa, we learned some of those things that they did back in Africa and all those kinds of things that were needed to be brought forward. So Ujima is one of the 7 principles of Kwanzaa, and it means working together. And so that's what we attempted to do, was to work together, but we attempted to work together in a whole new way. So the design was how the process was actually going to run, what the circles needed to look like, who needed to be in those circles, and what had to happen before those individuals could be invited into those circles, what we had to do to prepare to be in those circles, and how can we set those potentially adversarial circles up to be successful and come away with people having some understanding and a new heart to go forward, so to speak. We keep this candle lit as a reminder of our focus to do no further harm.
Honesty.
Love.
Future. Important.
Life.
No racism.
Joy.
Everybody's equal when you're a child.